Roman Reigns made his latest WWE return on this week's edition of WWE Raw. And the question is, are we back? A little drama with the Bloodline? Is it officially back? Is this for real? Well, we know that WWE is cooking up something interesting here because they dropped a couple very big hints as to what direction they're headed in with these three members of the original Bloodline, Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, and Jimmy Uso. And we've said for the longest time, this was kind of the way this thing was going to flow. The Bloodline was the best thing going on WWE television for years, ever since Roman Reigns made that transition from the big dog to the tribal chief. And we knew that at some point everyone was going to go their separate ways from that initial core group of the Bloodline, right? And it's happened with Reigns, with Jey, with Jimmy, with Sami Zayn, with Paul Heyman. That is kind of, the group that most people are going to remember as maybe the best version of the Bloodline. But we always knew they were going to find their way back to each other. We saw them reunite last year at Survivor Series for War Games, and now we're seeing a reunion of sorts with Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, and Jimmy Uso because, well, they're not only just family, but they also have a common goal, and that is to destroy the Vision. Whether it's Seth Rollins, whether it's Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, or yes, the Oracle / Wise Man / whoever else you want to call him, Paul Heyman. And so it is setting up something to where we're clearly, maybe for a second straight year, could get another version of the Bloodline, perhaps teaming up in a War Game setting in November at Survivor Series. Could that be a possibility? Sure. But the bigger story here is what they are doing with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso specifically. We've said it over the past couple weeks. They've been doing this different sort of direction with Jey as to where he's not just Jey Uso who's coming out yeeting, wearing all, the colorful stuff and having all this fun and everything. No, he's a pissed off Jey Uso because he lost the World Heavyweight Championship not long ago. And as I keep saying, I think one of the main themes of the story is that getting there was very tough for Jey. It was a very tough road. But they always say, getting there is one thing, but once you actually taste that success and you realize that you may never get it again, that is the part that gets you the most. And so Jey is feeling that frustration. He's pissed off because he wants to find his way back, and yet at every single turn, it feels like that's not happening. He's not getting closer, and he specifically said it on this show, talking about how he could be World Heavyweight Champion right now. Of course, he has his issues with LA Knight. He has his issues with everyone else that's trying to get in his way. However, now with Reigns returning and the interaction that these two had, it is very clear that WWE is setting up something that I think is going to be fascinating. And yes, it may bring us a little bit more drama with the Bloodline because, as we know with the closing shot on Raw this week, it was Roman Reigns and Jey Uso embracing. These two hugging it out. Little handshake. All about family, right? But we also know there's a guy standing in the background right there in Jimmy Uso who is looking at something that he feels like may be an absolute nightmare. And why? Because Jimmy said this before. This was part of the theme with the Bloodline originally, was that Jimmy was fearful that Jey was going to eventually become Roman. And that has kind of been the turn that they've been setting here for a little bit. And I don't mean an absolute heel turn for Jey Uso. I mean just the turn from the Yeet Man to this very serious, sort of, again, prideful Jey Uso who realizes what he can be, right? Because he won the world championship. And he even threw the little jab at Jimmy on this show, on Raw, saying that Jimmy didn't know what the hell that was like because he's not been the world champion. He's exactly right. And so you're seeing Jimmy here. And the way they set this up, we always say WWE and the presentation, the camera angles, they're all by design. This right here is the perfect example of that. When you've got Roman Reigns on one side, Jey Uso on the other, they're embracing, they're chatting, Jay's going to smash them all, Roman's telling him it's his show. Roman's basically giving him the motivational speech to where Jey wants to run through a brick wall for him, right? And meanwhile, you see right there in the middle, it's Jimmy Uso standing back there, just had a hard match. The man's worn out, but he's also shaking his head because he knows what this could mean. He knows what's to come. He's seeing both of these guys, not just Jey. He's seeing that old version of Roman Reigns, although, as we've said, Reigns has never really changed. And I think that's the whole point. He's never changed from what he used to be. He's the same guy. It's just a different evolution of him, right? The fans are cheering him now versus the way it was back then, although let's be honest, there are a lot of people still cheering him when he was the tribal chief at his height. So it is one where I think the way they're setting this up now, and you see the direction they're headed in, and all of these little tiny presentation teases, which is what we talked about all last year, right? Think about it. Back to 2024. Go back and look at all the videos we did and all these things, the way they were setting it up with The Rock and everything going on with the Bloodline. We may be back because they are doing this kind of stuff now with Roman and Jey, and I think it's going to make for an absolutely fascinating setup to see where they go from here, because you have different options, right? Are they just doing this because Roman is kind of playing that motivational leader type role because it's his family? He's trying to pick Jey back up after he fell down. That would be an obvious sort of reason for Roman to come back and kind of push this idea on Jey that he needs to be the guy, right? Worry about himself. Worry about the family, the bloodline. Don't worry about LA Knight. Don't worry about all this other stuff that Jimmy seems to be occupying himself with. Big Jim's got to get it together, according to Roman Reigns. So that is something maybe where how are they going to play that up? And I know some people are thinking, well, hold on a second. Does this mean we're going to get Jey versus Jimmy again? Because the last one didn't go so well. We may get Jey versus Jimmy again. I think the next one will go better than the last one. But I think this is something, though. I love the way they're doing this, and I'm glad they revisited this because you couldn't just have Jey lose the title and then go back to being just the tag team guy. And yet, from Jey's perspective, he could look at this and say, well, what happened after I lost the title? I basically went back to being tag team guy. Sure, he got a shot at Clash in Paris and all this other stuff. But now he's back to where he started. He's just in a tag team with his brother. And that's not enough for Jey. He needs more now because he's tasted that success. He's been the champion. He's been at the top. And like he said, Jimmy doesn't know anything about that. So that whole dynamic is going to play into how they do this with Reigns and Jey and Jimmy. And what does that lead to? You know, and I think that's going to be kind of the fun part here to see where they go next, because I think there are lots of ways you can do this. Does Jey eventually realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't be listening to Roman? We've seen that before. You know, does Roman, eventually do something unexpected and all of a sudden there's a lot more twists and turns in the relationship between Jey and Jimmy? I mean, there's plenty you can do with this, folks, given the backstory and the history. And I know, like I said, some people may not want to revisit this soon. But now I think is the perfect time because you are having Jey in sort of a very interesting predicament. What does he do after being the man, right? Not Becky Lynch, but now that he was the man for a good while. He got that big moment at WrestleMania, became the champion. But now, does Jey look at himself as a failure because he lost the title? What does Reigns think of him? Jimmy's trying to do all this stuff with LA Knight, and yet Jey just sees LA Knight as a threat. He sees everyone else as a threat, so he's going to go smash them all to get what he wants. That's some old school Roman Reigns type thinking right there. And so, again, there's so many ways they can go about this because Jimmy was always the one who was concerned that Jey was going to become this, was going to be the person, remember, that Reigns thought could be the hand-picked next guy, right? It was going to be Jey. Jey was the future. He was the next tribal chief maybe, or whatever they wanted to do at that point. Reigns had all the confidence in the world, but then Jey at that point realized, hey, I can break off and do my own thing. I'm not following, the orders of the tyrant here in Roman Reigns when he was doing all these things. So it all comes back together, and it all comes full circle now given where all three of these guys are at. They do need each other at this point based on their feud with the Vision. But they all have their own individual needs as well. And for Jey, that's getting back to the top. And maybe, just maybe, for Roman Reigns, that's getting Jey in a position to be the next tribal chief. Because Roman Reigns realizes, hey, I'm out making movies. I'm doing all this other stuff. He's not a full-time star anymore. So, and then meanwhile, Jimmy just standing back there, shaking his head, knowing what's to come. It's perfect. And so now we see how WWE does things from here, because I think there's a lot of ways you can go with what you do next with Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, and Jimmy Uso, and how it ties into the history of the Bloodline. What's going to happen? You guys let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button as well. Like I said, we're talking more Bloodline here. That's basically how this channel got started. So I'm intrigued to see what's next. You guys let me know your thoughts. Appreciate you watching as always. And let me know your thoughts on what's next for the Bloodline and Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, and Jimmy Uso.